When we think of where we hold our stress, most of us picture tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, or a stiff neck. But your pelvic floor is one of the primary stress receptacles in the human body. When your brain perceives a threat, and one of the very first things it does is clench the muscles of the base of your pelvis, curling your metaphorical tail between your legs to protect your vital organs.
Midlife in Motion is a podcast for women who want to reclaim their metabolism, maintain their mobility, and recognize their divine worth. I'm your host, Angie Collingwood, fitness and yoga instructor, body confidence, and menopause coach. This show bridges the gap between science and soul. We move beyond quick fixes to discuss the real pillars of longevity. Get ready to start dancing into midlife.
Welcome back to the podcast. Did I just pee my pants? The silent struggle. This is the first of 2 episodes, Why You Leak and the Hidden Triggers. Breaking the silence. Today we are talking about a topic that affects millions of people, yet almost no one wants to bring it up at a dinner party. Bladder leakage. If you have ever sneezed, laughed, jumped on a trampoline, or lifted something heavy and felt that sudden embarrassing leak, I want to validate exactly where you are. It is incredibly frustrating. Bladder leakage, often referred to as urinary incontinence, is a common symptom of pelvic floor dysfunction. Many people are told that leakage is a normal part of aging or childbirth. While it is a common occurrence for many women, it is also treatable. Today, we are going to break the shame, explain the biological causes, and show how the whole body, feet, ribs, stress, diet impacts the pelvic floor. Now, before we talk about the mechanics of your pelvis today, I need you to hear something very clearly. Your body is not broken, and it has not failed you. If you are leaking, your body is simply responding to the environment, the stress, and the loads it has been forced to carry. Whether that was growing a human, navigating hormonal shifts, or just surviving a highly stressful decade, your body did exactly what she had to do to get you here today. There is zero room for shame in this conversation. We are just here to learn our biology. The causes of bladder leakage generally fall into several categories. First is physical life stages and events. Let's look at the biological events that change our pelvic floor. The first and most common is pregnancy and childbirth. Think about the mechanics here. The size of the baby, the delivery method. These events significantly affect pelvic floor structure and function. Specific factors including the size of the baby, the mechanism of delivery such as forceps use, and any 3rd or 4th degree perineal tears sustained during birth. Aging and menopause. As people age, they may experience sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss that can affect the pelvic floor. Additionally, during menopause, dropping estrogen levels increases collagen breakdown, which can compromise the integrity of the pelvic floor and bladder function. Surgery. Procedures such as a hysterectomy or other gynecological surgeries can weaken the muscles and ligaments that support pelvic organs, leading to leakage. Lifestyle and health factors. Chronic strain. Conditions that cause repetitive trauma or pressure on the pelvic floor can lead to dysfunction. This includes chronic constipation, extra energy storage, and chronic or heavy coughing. Occupational and physical stress. Occupations involving heavy lifting or high-impact moves such as jumping or sprinting can place excessive load on a weakened pelvic floor. Activities like cycling or horseback riding also put direct pressure on that area, which may lead to nerve irritation or muscle tension. Medical conditions. Health issues such as diabetes can affect the motor and sensory nerves related to bladder control. Pelvic organ prolapse, where organs like the bladder or uterus slip from their normal position, is also a direct cause of leaking. Habits and mechanics. Bladder irritants. Consuming alcohol, coffee, carbonated drinks, and spicy or acidic foods can increase urinary urgency, sometimes leading to leaks. Improper breathing. Inhaling without proper diaphragm movement or exhaling by pushing too hard with the abdominal muscles can generate excessive downward pressure on the pelvic floor. Similarly, chronically sucking in your stomach can lead to overactive or tense pelvic muscles that eventually weaken and fail to function properly. Posture. Biomechanical studies show that chronic poor posture directly impacts the pelvic floor's ability to fire correctly under pressure. If you sit with a deeply tucked tailbone slouching backward onto your lower back, you are physically turning off your glutes and shortening the pelvic floor. This makes it mechanically impossible for the muscle hammock to absorb shock effectively when you laugh or cough. Focus on sitting upright on your sit bones to keep the pelvic floor in an optimal active position. Poor bathroom habits. Practices such as power peeing, straining to empty the bladder, can damage the muscles over time. Leaking is not always just a pelvic floor strength problem. Other contributing factors such as abdominal weakness, uneven core engagement, and rib cage position are all interconnected components of a pressure management system that directly impacts pelvic floor function and leaking. When this system is out of sync, the pelvic floor is forced to work harder, often leading to dysfunction. Abdominal weakness and uneven engagement. The lower abdominals are part of a coordinated team that includes the pelvic floor, diaphragm, and deep core muscles. When this team doesn't work together, even high amounts of generic core work may not prevent leaking. Lower abdominals provide essential support for pelvic floor function. If they are weak or not engaging correctly, the pelvic floor must fight an uphill battle to prevent leaking. Upper versus lower ab dominance. If core engagement feels like it is happening all up top, upper ab dominance, the lower abs cannot effectively support the pelvis and the pelvic floor. Excessive downward pressure. Conversely, exhaling too forcefully can generate excessive downward pressure on the pelvic floor, which can trigger leaks. The sucking in habit. Chronically sucking in your stomach to appear flatter can lead to overactive and tense pelvic floor muscles, which eventually become weak because they are never allowed to relax and function through their full range of motion. Rib cage position and pressure management. The position of your rib cage determines how well your body handles pressure during movement and breathing. Rib flare. A flared rib cage often indicates that the body is not managing pressure effectively. This happens when the rib cage elevates and angles forward instead of relying on the diaphragm to pull air in. The body compensates by overextending the spine and pushing the ribs forward. Because the ribs remain open, the body struggles to exhale completely and engage the core and pelvic floor. 360-degree expansion. Optimal function requires the rib cage to expand into the front, sides, and back. This technique properly utilizes the diaphragm. As you inhale, your lungs expand in all directions. The belly gently rises, the lateral ribs widen outward, and the back expands. This prevents the front ribs from popping up by balancing pressure across the entire core system. Impact of limited expansion. If the ribs do not move properly, breathing often alternates between shallow chest breaths and all belly breathing. This unbalanced expansion prevents the diaphragm from descending properly, leading to poor pressure distribution and undue stress on the pelvic floor. Make sure to check out this episode on YouTube so you can see a physical diagram of what flared rib cage compared to 360-degree breathing looks like. Leaking is often not just a weak pelvic floor problem, but a system failure. Another part of that system is joint alignment, the surprising connection, your feet and your pelvic floor. Now, I want to talk about a piece of the puzzle that almost everyone misses. It sounds a little crazy, but if you have been working on your pelvic floor for months with zero progress, the root cause might actually be inside your shoes. Your feet and your pelvic floor are part of the exact same kinetic chain. Here is how they are connected. The shock absorbers. When you walk, run, or jump, your feet are your body's first line of defense. They are engineered to roll, splay, and flex to absorb the shock of hitting the ground. But if your feet are stiff or you wear tight, restrictive shoes all day, they cannot absorb that impact. So guess where the force travels? It shoots straight up your legs and directly into your pelvis. Your pelvic floor ends up working overtime to absorb the shock that your feet couldn't handle, which leads to severe muscle exhaustion and leaking. The arch tension test. There is a literal mechanical connection between the arches of your feet and the hammock of your pelvic floor. You can actually test this yourself right now. If you're standing, try aggressively lifting the arches of your feet, really gripping the floor and rolling your weight to the outside edges of your shoes. Did you feel that? You will likely feel your glutes and pelvic floor automatically tighten. If your feet are constantly gripping or rigid, your pelvic floor is probably stuck in a state of chronic tension too. Sometimes simply learning to massage, stretch, and relax your feet is a missing key to getting your pelvic floor to finally letting go. The elimination posture. Finally, your feet position completely dictates how safely you use the bathroom. We talked earlier about the chronic constipation and straining can damage the muscles of the pelvic floor. This is where the famous squatty potty concept comes in. To fully empty your bowels, you need to elevate your knees above your hips. Placing your feet flat on a small stool while leaning forward on the toilet puts your pelvic floor in its prime, relaxed anatomical position. It makes elimination effortless and protects those delicate muscles from unnecessary downward pressure. If you have been chasing symptoms in your pelvic floor and hitting a wall, you might need to zoom out. Start paying attention to your feet. Walk barefoot in the grass, spread your toes, get a bathroom stool, and give your pelvic floor a break from the ground up. We've talked about physical trauma and posture, but there is one contributing factor to pelvic floor dysfunction that is almost always overlooked, and it might be the most important one of all: stress. When we think of where we hold our stress, most of us picture tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, or a stiff neck. But your pelvic floor is one of the primary stress receptacles in the human body. Here is why. Your pelvic floor is wired directly into your nervous system's fight or flight response. When your brain perceives a threat, whether that is a literal physical danger, a chaotic day with toddlers, financial anxiety, or just the endless pinging of your email inbox, your body automatically braces for impact. And one of the very first things it does is clench the muscles of the base of your pelvis, curling your metaphorical tail between your legs to protect your vital organs. Now, I want to pause here and just validate the emotional weight of this. Constantly carrying tension in your pelvic floor is exhausting. Living with a hypervigilant nervous system is exhausting. If you have been feeling disconnected from your body or frustrated that it isn't doing what it used to, please know that your feelings are incredibly valid. You aren't just dealing with a physical symptom. You are carrying an emotional weight, and it is okay to acknowledge how heavy that has been. The accumulation effect, that years of this stress and tension physically accumulate. We are incredibly good at powering through our days, but our bodies keep the score. It's not just the physical stress of childbirth or the hormonal shifts of menopause that cause leaking. It can also be a buildup of daily emotional exhaustion, past trauma, or living in a state of chronic overwhelm. So, how do we fix this? You cannot just Kegel your way out of nervous system dysregulation. We have to start living a pelvic-centric lifestyle, and that means prioritizing nervous system regulation as a medical necessity. You have to actively teach your body that it is safe to let go. Using deep diaphragmatic breathing, taking 5 minutes to stretch on the floor, or simply resting your legs against the wall are not just self-care luxuries. They are fundamental, non-negotiable strategies to release the emotional tension trapped in your pelvic floor, allowing those muscles to finally rest, recover, and do their job. The chemical environment. We cannot talk about the pelvic floor muscles without also discussing the environment in which they live. There is clinical evidence that what we consume directly dictates how our bladders behave. I want to be very clear. We are not talking about diet culture here. We are not talking about shrinking your body to fix your pelvic floor. We are talking about the chemical reactions that occur in the lining of your bladder. If you are struggling with urgency or leaking, here are 4 dietary triggers you need to be aware of. The hydration paradox. When people start experiencing bladder leaks, their first instinct is almost always to drink less water. It makes logical sense, right? If I drink less, I'll leak less. But this actually makes the problem so much worse. When you restrict water, your urine becomes concentrated and acidic. This acts as a severe chemical irritant to the bladder lining. Your bladder responds to this acid by spasming, which triggers that sudden, uncontrollable urge to pee. You actually want to drink enough water to keep your urine a pale yellow, which keeps the bladder lining calm and happy. The sneaky bladder irritants. Certain dietary compounds are clinically documented to stimulate the detrusor muscle. That is the muscle in your bladder wall, causing it to contract prematurely. The biggest evidence-based culprits are high levels of preservatives, artificial flavors, MSG, high sugar content, coffee, alcohol, carbonated fizzy drinks, and artificial sweeteners like aspartame. If you are constantly dealing with that, I have to go right now urgency, I challenge you to try eliminating ultra-processed foods, artificial sweeteners, alcohol, and carbonated drinks to see if your bladder naturally calms down. The gut-bladder real estate issue. You cannot treat pelvic floor dysfunction without looking at your digestion. Clinical data show that chronic constipation is a leading aggravating factor for urinary incontinence. Your bladder and your rectum share the same very tiny real estate inside the pelvic bowl. If your rectum is constantly full of hard stool, it physically presses up against the bladder, squishing it and reducing its capacity to hold urine. Plus, the chronic straining on the toilet severely weakens those pelvic muscles. Managing your fiber intake and eating whole nutrient-dense foods are primary non-negotiable steps to stopping leaks. Nourishing the tissues. Finally, we have to feed the smooth muscle tissue of your pelvic organs, maintaining adequate levels of calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin K2, found in leafy greens like kale and spinach. This is vital for reducing inflammation in the urinary tract. Also, consuming healthy fats, specifically extra virgin olive oil, is highly recommended for women navigating perimenopause and menopause. The compounds in olive oil actually help your tissues adapt as your natural estrogen levels fluctuate, keeping your pelvic tissues plump and resilient. What you put on your plate isn't just fuel, it is a communication system to your bladder. By hydrating properly, prioritizing fiber, and removing chemical irritants, you can often dramatically reduce your symptoms before you ever even do a single pelvic floor exercise. We have covered so much ground today. You now understand why your body is responding this way. Next week, in part 2 of this series, we are moving entirely into action. I'm going to teach you the misconception about Kegels, walk you through physical techniques to stop the leaks, and give you an empowering cheat sheet for your next doctor's appointment. You won't want to miss it. Let's take a moment to find some calm amidst the chaos. Allow yourself this time to pause. Place the hand on your heart. Take a deep breath. Feel gratitude and give yourself a 20-second hug and thank your body for her continued strength. Embrace your inner power. Thank you for being here today. Trust yourself, honor your biology, and remember, you were born to bloom gold. See you next time.
You are building a foundation for the next 40+ years of your life, brick by brick, breath by breath. You are a miracle. Treat yourself like one. If you know a woman who needs to hear this, please share this episode and remember to subscribe. I'm Angie Collingwood. Keep moving and dancing. This is Midlife in Motion. I'll see you soon.